Welcome back to Voice of the Valley. Today we are here with Marc Lozano. He is the director of In the Zone Athletics, and he also runs several nonprofits throughout Pennsylvania. How are you doing today, Marc?
Doing good. Thanks for having me, Kia.
It's great to have you, bro. Our partnership with American Christian League has been taking off within the zone.
Yeah, it's been awesome. It's awesome to see grown men playing basketball and no one getting thrown out for fights. That's a no small feat.
Yeah. So ever since Will, the previous director, stepped down, how have things been transitioning at In the Zone?
I was talking to my wife about this the other day. December was when Will Michaels stepped down as the director, and I kind of stepped in. And given the other nonprofits that I run, and also having a big family, we've got 5 kids, all very young ages. December was probably the busiest month of my life.
Hmm.
Like, it was pretty crazy. We had also just moved into a new house like 2 months prior. So December was really, really busy, but it has smoothed out a lot since then. And there's still a lot to be done in the zone, but it's a lot smoother than I expected over the first couple months.
And how have people taken up with the new courts?
The new courts, I think, are the talk of the town. Like, we've gotten phone calls from people we never got phone calls from before, wanting to run tournaments, AAU tournaments and volleyball leagues, and a bunch of different trainers and everything have reached out just because they knew that the new floors are there. And I mean, these floors are amazing. They're on level with the retraction rate of an NBA court or a FIBA court. Retraction rate being how much the floor gives as you run on it for the health of your knees and joints and everything like that. And I mean, playing on it myself, it's a world of difference from playing on like the old concrete and tile floors and everything like that, or even at the local YMCA's around the area, and then going to play on these courts. Like, my knees feel so much better after playing on them.
Yeah, I mean, last game we did cook y'all. I think that was the first game of the season in the ACL.
Ooh, I mean, it was a
It
close
was a close
game.
game. Yeah.
I had I went cold in the second half.
I know.
I did good in the first half. Went cold in the second.
I had to
I
get
couldn't keep
my
it going.
I had to get our get back in the fall. You guys absolutely crushed us. I mean, I remember that was one of the hardest games we played because you guys run the game so slow. Like, you know, what I mean,
We're
it's like
old. That's why. We're old and we play defense. Well, we
yeah.
try to play defense the right way, but we're just old, so it's got to be slow. Can't be fast.
And how about the new AAU prospects that has been going on in the zone? Can you share some insight on that?
Yeah, the Purpose Built Prospects is the new AAU program going on In the Zone. We had over 120 kids try out for the program. We now have about 80 kids signed up, getting ready to do the spring season. Uh, In the Zone traditionally had a female dominant AAU program, and we were like 70% female, 30% male, and that's completely flipped this year. But we have some really competitive teams, and we're really excited about the new branding of the Purpose Built Prospects. It's a lot of people were excited for that new program to come in because, I mean, In the Zone has been around for 20 years, and Push the Rock, who purchased In the Zone 3 years ago, they're the owners of it now, and we just knew that there was a change that needed to be made, just to rebrand and everything. And that Purpose Built Prospects AAU program, one of the main reasons we wanted to change the name from just In the Zone AAU to that is because we wanted to introduce a faith element to
Mm.
the AAU program, which is what In the Zone is all about.
And really going deeper into that, Push the Rock, the parent company. Can you tell us a little bit about Push the Rock?
Yeah, Push the Rock is a international ministry an international sports ministry, and they are started here in the Lehigh Valley, but they are all over the place, all over the eastern coast of the United States. They're in Guatemala, Brazil, Portugal, Zambia, a couple other countries, and they go around. They build courts, they do clinics, they run volleyball clinics and basketball clinics, and they do I always forget it. What's the frisbee?
Frisbee
Disc
golf?
golf. Disc
Okay.
golf, right? They do disc golf all over. They have a whole program separate that's called Eagles Wings that they do disc golf with. So Push the Rock is amazing. They do all these different ministerial works, and they were looking for a revenue generator for the ministry to fund all these different international ministries that they got going on in all these different countries. And they bounced around a bunch of different ideas. And then In the Zone's old owner, Steve Turpening, decided to sell the business that had been established for 19 years. And it was right in Push the Rock's backyard. So the introduction was made between Steve Turpinning, the old owner, and Push the Rock, and it worked out. And now it's the owned by Push the Rock, and they're looking to uh, generate revenue from it. I'll put it this way: every dollar that is net profit from In the Zone goes back to ministry, and it goes back to help fund all of the things that Push the Rock does here in the United States and abroad.
And how does that look like? Like you just brought up Guatemala. Like how do these ministries look like in the other countries?
They're all a little bit different in each country because it depends on what the needs of that country is or are. Some of them are building courts. Some of them are just running camps and clinics. Some of them are going to coaches of schools in those areas and teaching them how to coach basketball, how to coach volleyball. And then sometimes they're just bringing American teams, youth teams, college teams to those countries to play against kids from those countries. So it's just, exposure to American athletics. It's exposure to how we coach and what the clinics are. And the goal of all of it is to introduce Christ to these
Mhm.
kids.
And how do you think Push the Rock has been doing that? How do you think they've been introducing Jesus Christ to these people through basketball
I
and
mean,
other sports?
I think Push the Rock does it the right way because they do it the long game. So they're not going there saying, all right, say Jesus is your savior, then we're going to baptize you, and now we're going to leave. They establish a presence there long term and just constantly introduce the gospel, introduce Christ to these kids and to these coaches and to these parents. And then they stay there and help them walk through the journey. David Wallen, who is the president emeritus of Push the Rock, was telling me a great story the other day. He was going to, I believe this was Portugal. I may be getting that wrong. Portugal or Spain. He was going to Portugal. He had been going there for 8 years to the same community center. It was for underprivileged children. And they were doing basketball clinics and volleyball clinics and, bringing teams over from the US to play against them and all that fun stuff. And for 8 years, there was this one girl that always stood out to him. And whenever they would start to talk about Jesus or they would start to share the gospel or they would do their Bible study or devotion, she would shut down on them. And he would go up to her and say, like, you're not communicating with us. You're not giving us any feedback. What can we do? And she was just, she was a young girl, but she was just, I don't know, teens or some early teens. And she was like, you Christians are all the same. You just, you come, you do something, you say something really nice and you leave. And he's like, we've been coming here for 8 years. What more do you want? Like, well, we're not going anywhere. And she eventually had like aged out of whatever program it was. But one of the coaches that worked with this clinic that was local to, again, I'm forgetting if it's Spain or Portugal. One of the coaches that was local contacted David Walton just recently and said that this particular girl is now a Christian running some of the sports camps and everything in a different part of the country. And it was because, and she had referenced David Walton and Push the Rock for their kind of perseverance of playing the long game and staying there and doing the right thing for a long duration and not just a mission trip for 3 days and then going back home.
So it's a gradual, it's a gradual change. I want to go into your story, Mark, and how your story looked up. So how was your life growing up, and how did you, give your life to Jesus? Like, can we start at the beginning?
Yeah, sure. My family is from upstate New York. I was born in upstate New York. I only have one sister. She's 3 years older, and she was born with a brain tumor on her optic nerve. That eventually caused her to go blind when she was 4 years old because they had to cut her optic nerve to do a bunch of different brain surgeries. That caused my parents to move down to Florida when I was 3 and my sister was 6 because even though at the time this is in like the mid 90s, at the time Florida had a terrible education system. They were like ranked almost dead last in the United States, but Florida was the only state where my sister could get a regular diploma without going to private school. So that was really big for my parents. My parents didn't have a lot of money. So we moved down to Florida. And the reason I'm telling you this is because my sister's illness and all of the medical bills and everything play a huge role in what I'm going to tell you next. We were nominally Catholic. We would go to Mass on Sundays. And I got baptized, confirmed, and all that good stuff. But around 11 or 12 years old, after I was confirmed, I started just arguing with my parents. I didn't want to go to mass. I didn't want to go. I mean, I was really into basketball. I was really into sports. I didn't want to take up my Sunday mornings by going to church and all this stuff. And I'm arguing, and my parents didn't really give a whole lot of pushback. They were just like, okay, well, you guys are confirmed. We're not going to go back anymore. The reason my parents did that is because both my mom and my dad had kind of a sore spot for what happened to my sister as a child. And God is usually the scapegoat for things like that. So it's like, why did this bad thing have to happen to me? Why did this bad thing have to happen to this person I love? Like, if no one is close in proximity to blame, I'm going to blame the Almighty. So we stopped going to mass, to church, when I was around 11 or 12 years old. And then through middle school and high school, when asked about it, whether I believe or don't believe or anything, because I had a couple Christian basketball coaches along that way, and I would just tell them I was an atheist. Probably barely knew what the word meant, but I just knew it meant that they would stop asking me about God. And I eventually I graduated high school, and by the time I graduated high school and going into college, I became really obsessed with philosophy. And I was just like kind of an obsessive reader, and I would read like the New Atheists. I would read a lot of old philosophers from Nietzsche to Kierkegaard to Kant and everybody, all the like. And I kind of formed myself into that atheistic persona. But then when I went to college, I was kind of bitter going into college because I wanted a Division I basketball scholarship, right? Didn't get that. I only got offers from Division IIs, Division IIIs, and I was like, if I can't play for the best, I don't want to play at all. So I was real prideful that way. I ended up taking an academic scholarship to go to this Division II school in Lakeland, Florida called Florida Southern College. It's right outside Orlando, in between Orlando and Tampa. And so I go to Florida Southern on an academic scholarship, and I miss basketball so much that I say, I need to do something with basketball. I miss it too much. I couldn't work for the men's team because they had the manager position open for like the men's team. I'm like, I can't work for the men's team. I was recruited to play against like these guys and stuff. And then I would just be like sitting there giving them towels. Again, too prideful, didn't want to do that. But they had this like student coach position for the women's team. So a lot of colleges do this. Like they get a guy who was really good in high school, or a guy who, some good athlete from another sports team or whatever, and they organize pickup games for the women. And so I went into that role. So I would go to all the women's practices. I would, play one-on-one against whoever their best player was, their point guard was, that kind of stuff. And so that happens freshman year. And then sophomore year, they have a sophomore on the team. She was the second string point guard her freshman year. And the second year comes along, and now she's the starter. But the head coach of the women's team sits me down and was like, all right, we need Taylor this is the girl's name. We need Taylor to become more of a scorer. And your job for the whole season is play one-on-one with her, 3 dribble limit, full court one-on-one, do all this stuff. You got to make her into a scorer. And I'm like, sure, yeah, all right, let's do that. Well, we do that, and me and her become really, really good friends, and eventually we start dating. Turns out she's a cradle Catholic. She's someone who takes her faith very, very seriously, in my atheistic mindset and everything. So we like fall in love somewhat quickly upon dating, and it's like a good honeymoon phase, but then our differences in morals and values come about, and we start arguing constantly. I mean, like fighting like cats and dogs. But we don't break up or anything. We stay together. We end up staying together all the way through grad school. Like I ended up leaving the student coach position from the women's team and ended up playing for the men's team. We both end up going to grad school, and through the whole time we stick together, but we're fighting like all the time. But neither of us are like getting out. So I'm like, all right, one of us has got to cave. Either you're gonna leave your faith, or I'm gonna I'm gonna, become a Christian. And I'm like, I'm definitely not becoming a Christian. So you're leaving the faith. So I start reading everything I can, trying to convince her. We're arguing. I'm always trying to convince, and I'm more articulate. I'm a better arguer. I have those attributes. She has this blind faith and everything to her. So I'm giving her every argument in the book of why she shouldn't believe or why this is nonsense and everything. And eventually she's like, all right, you've read all of your like people, the new atheists from like Sam Harris and Dennett and Dawkins and Hitchens and all these old guys, Nietzsche and Freud and all this stuff. She's like, why don't you look at the other perspective? And I'm like, all right, that'll just fuel my arguments. Come know it's going to be nonsense. So again, I'm an obsessive person. I'm a voracious reader. I read, the Bible cover to cover. I read the Catechism cover to cover. I read, Aquinas's Summa Theologia. I read the Confessions. I read every word Chesterton wrote, every word C.S. Lewis wrote. Like, I'm going through this. And slowly but surely, I never want to admit it, but I'm an intellectual Christian at this point, to the point where I'm talking to my friends and my family who know that of my perspective on faith and religion. And they're like, putting out straw man arguments and saying like, oh yeah, aren't they so silly for believing this? And I would start arguing with them. And they're like, wait. Aren't you on our side? And I was like, yeah, but we can't put out the straw man, blah, blah, blah. And eventually I had to realize like at this point in my life, like me and Taylor are both out of college. We're actually engaged to be married. We're living in Pennsylvania. So we both moved. She's from Pennsylvania. I'm from Florida, but we met playing basketball in Florida. We both moved to Pennsylvania after college. We're living here. We're engaged, be married. And I have to admit to myself, I'm like, I'm not a full Christian, but I'm an intellectual Christian. Like I believe all the arguments. I believe all this stuff. And I'm like, but if you ever like have your heart and your soul disagreeing with your mind, like it'll twist you in knots. Like it'll just twist you up in knots. And it'll make you literally physically sick. Like if your heart wants something and your mind wants something else and they're not in agreement, like you will get physically ill from that. And I realized that I was making myself miserable. So I was like, all right, I believe all the arguments. Like I can recite them better. I know that if I go back and I read the Sam Harris or the Nietzsche or something like that, I can poke holes in their arguments like no other. But I can't do that with Aquinas and the Summa Theologia. I can't do that with the Catechism. I can't do that with the commentaries on Scripture and stuff. I can't poke holes in their philosophy or their reasoning, but I can easily poke holes in the reasoning behind these atheistic thinkers. So I'm like, all right, throughout all this, never prayed once in my life. Like never crossed myself, never prayed to God. It was just reading. It was all an intellectual endeavor. Well, finally, I say the prayers. I finally get on my knees for probably the first time since I was a little kid going to Sunday school. Say the prayers, and it's like the heart was set on fire. Like from that moment, my heart finally agreed with my intellect, and it's never looked back since. And I credit my wife Taylor for being, I always call her my Saint Monica because Saint Monica's famous for, she's Saint Augustine's mom, and she would always pray for him even when he was doing the worst possible things a human being can do. And she was that for me, and how she saw that she was so confident that I was going to come out the other side. I don't know how she was so confident, but yeah, that's kind of the faith journey as somewhat quickly as I can say it.
That was 10 out of 10. Joe, anything?
You said that you guys go on the missions to different countries, right?
Yeah, so I haven't personally gone. That's Push the Rocks.
Push the Rocks?
Yeah.
Do you end up, do you think you're going to go in the near future?
Probably not in the near future just because of so many, we have 5 little kids. So it's like, it's real tough to get.
You have 5
travel.
kids?
We have 5 kids. Yeah, we have 3 girls, 2 boys. The ages are from 1.5 to 7. So nice. It's a lot of little kids, and my wife and I, we don't travel too much anymore because really? It's chaotic if you ever travel with a lot of little kids.
So what are some of the things that you do within the zone?
So in the zone, well, previously when Push the Rock bought In the Zone, Steve Turpinning, the old owner, did everything. Like he was the AAU coach, he was the facility manager, he was the finance guy, he did everything. But he was really burnt out by the time he sold it and retired. So we brought Will Michaels in, and the goal was that we were going to divide and conquer. Like we were going to have a finance guy, we're going to have a facility manager guy, we're going to have a director, we're going to have an AAU director. And Will came on board as the director, and it never really worked out for a whole bunch of reasons. It wasn't on Will or anything. It was a whole bunch of reasons why it just never worked out to where we could divide and conquer. So when he realized like he really had to step down and go back to New Jersey because a lot of his family was handling some health issues, and he wanted to go back to New Jersey and had to step down, and then I stepped into the director role, I was like, listen, we can't do more of the same. We can't have one guy trying to do everything and then failing at everything. So we were able to, because since I live locally in Pennsylvania, plus I have other jobs and everything, like obviously you didn't need to pay me a director salary to do all the things. And that freed us up to hire an AAU director, hire a morning coordinator, keep on a facility manager, and it's been really smooth. So to answer your question of what I do in the zone is I manage the finances and I basically approve decisions from my coordinators. So I have a AAU coordinator, I have like a facility coordinator, I have a morning time program coordinator. We have weekly staff meetings like every week, every Wednesday usually. They're all coming to me. We have fitness coordinator, all this stuff. They're coming to me like, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. This is the type of money that I need to do it. I say the yay or nay, and then hopefully we get the thing done.
So you took a pay cut, basically.
Yeah, well, compared to like what Will was doing and what the previous directors and everything. But I had the ability to because I've worked in the nonprofit world. I have 4 other nonprofits I manage. And one of the reasons I manage all these nonprofits, I'll give a shout out to Zion Health Share. Zion Health Share is so the biggest cost to an employee is always health insurance. I mean, a lot of these churches and stuff like parishes, Catholic parishes, Protestant churches, whatever, they're paying, their bookkeeper, their secretary and everything. Maybe they're paying them $30,000 a year or something like that. They're paying just as much in health insurance. I mean, the average cost for the year for health insurance for an employee working in one of those type of positions is like $26,000. So you pay them $30,000, then you're paying another $26,000 on top of it. All of a sudden, this employee is costing you $56,000. Well, I learned this at my in my old life, in my corporate job before I got into the nonprofits, which I'm sure we can talk about later, is health insurance is really, really difficult to navigate as an employer. And when I had my first child born, my oldest daughter, Graciela, she had to go to the NICU when she was born. Nothing really wrong with her, but she was born a couple weeks early. It was standard hospital procedure. She has to go to the NICU, help her with her breathing and all that stuff. And even though I had a good health insurance from an employer that was set up in New York City and everything like that, me and my wife got killed. So from then on, I was like, I got to find a different avenue for insurance. I ended up finding that there's these health share ministries out that cut out the middleman and everything. I joined Samaritan Ministries, and then I switched over to Zion, but they're both health share ministries. And that was a godsend because when we did that and I was still working at my corporate job in the city and everything, when I left, I was able to keep that health share type insurance. And when I started applying to be like the business manager for my first Catholic parish and everything, they realized, oh, we don't have to pay for your health insurance because you have this health share thing. And then because of that, they were like, oh, we can pay you a little bit more. And then the other churches and other nonprofits heard about me and heard about what I was doing for the business management and how that I wasn't as much money as a typical bookkeeper or financier or anything like that. And then I started getting offers because now I can manage all these different nonprofits, and I cut the biggest cost, which is health insurance, and it allows me to manage more nonprofits than I would otherwise, because otherwise you got to stick with one employer. They're covering the health insurance, and they wouldn't want to share you because they put so much into you. But now all these different nonprofits that I manage are very willing to share me because I can get the work done. I'm not costing them any employee benefits, and it allowed me to take like that pay cut for in the zone. So I've the reason that I work for so many different nonprofits really is the insurance aspect. Like none of them have to pay for my health insurance, and that awards those entities to want and be willing to share me with other entities. And none of those entities have to pay me like top dollar for it.
So are you guys expecting to get another location anytime soon?
They're not another location, but there are some talks about possibly expanding our current location.
Okay, like adding on?
Adding on, yeah. So there's an appetite. Again, this probably wouldn't be for quite a few years, but there is an appetite by the building owner and the Push the Rock board and all that stuff to possibly expand into the next lot next to us, which is a vacant lot right now. And it could potentially be turf fields for lacrosse, soccer, football, and track, which is something we all really want, but it's going to be a lot of raising money and quite a few years to probably make it happen. But
Yeah.
we didn't think God was going to give us 3 new basketball courts either, but he made that happen pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So can we go through some of the nonprofits that you manage?
Yeah, sure. So when I left my corporate job in the city, the very first one I started was Christ Center Capital. This is my own apostolate that I started, and that's got a really, it's got a meaty backstory to it.
Can we go into it?
Yeah, I'll try to be somewhat quick with it. So, my corporate job, I worked for the NBA. So I worked for the National Basketball Association for 6 years, from 2015 to right around the end of the pandemic. So 2015 to late 2020, early 2021. I worked for the NBA. I was a business operations manager. So basically the same thing I do for my nonprofits, I was doing for the NBA. Just the NBA deals with a lot more money and a lot more people. When I was working for the NBA, it was like my 17-year-old self's dream job. But upon my conversion, and my faith in Jesus Christ, like that dream job turned into like a job from hell, because you see what professional sports really is when you work on the inside of it, and what they essentially are, and what they aim to actually be is idol making factories. Because I would travel to All-Star weekends and stuff like that, and we would see these, kids who wanted to see courtside and everything. And I mean, they literally thought Steph Curry, LeBron James, they thought they were God. Like that was what you get the impression from them. It's not like, oh, that's a really cool celebrity. No, it's sycophant like idol worship. And you see it all the time. And like, of course that's what it is. I mean, right when I came into the NBA, this is a little bit of a tangent, but right when I came to the NBA was when the decision was made on like a very corporate level to lessen the advertisement of teams and up the advertisement of players. And marketing wise, financially, it's genius. And every other sports, professional sports league has kind of followed suit. And what they got it from, believe it or not, was like the WWE, because you manage a persona, you manage and WWE is not necessarily a sport, but it's like wildly successful, right? So right when I came into the NBA, they start managing players because, hey, if you're a Cavs fan, when LeBron goes to the Heat, you're going to burn his jersey. But if you're a LeBron fan, you're going to buy another jersey. You're going to buy the Miami Heat jersey. So again, financially, it's a genius ploy. But spiritually, it's got a lot of ills to it. And I didn't realize that when I first started the NBA, because my conversion hadn't really taken root. But when it did take root, I started realizing like all of the just problems that professional sports cause for kids and for like a healthy society, just in general. I won't get into all my diatribe on it. But not only that, there was also, I mean, I won't give an exact number, but the NBA takes a very significant portion of their $10 billion a year revenue from China. And we would have all this political activism here in the United States and encourage our players to do certain things and stuff. But, you know, we can't say anything about China because we can't risk that for, like, we had the Daryl Morey incident. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that from back in the day.
No.
So Daryl Morey was an owner. At the time,
Wasn't
he
it
was
for
the
the
owner.
Rockets?
He was the owner of the Rockets at the time, and he had mentioned something about like, seems like ages ago. He mentioned something about like free Hong Kong, or, you know, let Hong Kong get out from under China's boot or something like that, while the Rockets were doing a global game against the Lakers or something in China. And China immediately cut all of the revenue ties from Tencent and stuff to the NBA. And the NBA was like in an upheaval about this. Daryl Morey ended up, you know, getting ousted from the Rockets and everything. I can't remember all the details. It was,
Then he went to the Sixers.
he ended up going, well, he was out for a while, and then, you know, he slowly came back into the Sixers. But I was like, all this political activism stuff that we do, and I'm like, and then he just says one thing about Hong Kong, which was really should have been very uncontroversial, and boom, like, ooh, the NBA's in an upheaval because it was money, and money talks, you know? So I said to my wife one day, I was like, I think I got to get out. I got to, like, I can't keep working at the NBA. And to her credit, she was like, well, about time. It was like, I was waiting for you to say that. Because commuting to the city and stuff, it just wasn't ideal. And we were starting to have kids and bought a house and all that stuff. And I kid you not, 2 weeks before I left the NBA, my boss tells me, listen, I know you're kind of leaving on principle, but they're going to offer you like a better position and more money because like we needed people in the business operations team to stay. So he's like, so look out for the offer letter before you solidify your 2-week resignation. I'm like, okay. Well, you know, the offer comes in via email. Within like 2 minutes, I get another email from the deputy commissioner at the time, Mark Tatum, saying that the NBA has officially partnered with this organization called Athlete Ally. Athlete Ally, sole purpose is to let trans women, biological men, compete in female sports at the middle school and high school levels. And I'm just like, nope. Literally, I mean, within 2 minutes of each other, I got this better position at the NBA offer and this email.
Now, Mark, I just want to go into this. You know, I know we don't care about it, and I know you didn't care about it, but was the salary much higher?
It was a little bit higher. It was better benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a little bit higher, better benefits. And I mean, the upside at the NBA was, you know, I mean, I was working in Secaucus, New Jersey. I was working above the replay center, and then sometimes in Manhattan and at that office. So, I mean, you can imagine the salaries.
But it was like your heart and your mind just weren't.
No, I knew
couldn't.
that it was like, no matter what it was, I mean, they could offer me, you know, $10 million. But at that point, it was just like, this is crazy. Because, I mean, going back to like me and my wife, I mean, the whole female and male sports thing, my wife was a Division II starter who only played 3 years worth of games because she tore her ACL twice, and she still almost had 1,000 points. I was Joe Schmo bench warmer, end of the bench at a Division II level. But if me and her play 1-on-1, like, I'm gonna win because I'm 6'1" and she's 5'3", and I have muscle mass and bone density and everything like that. And I'm like, to allow, and I'm at the time that this came out, I have 2 little girls at home. I'm like, you're gonna erase sports for them. They're not gonna be able to compete. Like, that's ridiculous. Well, anyway, so I left the NBA, and this goes back to the original question of my first nonprofit that I started. I said, how am I going to make money for my family? We just bought a house. My wife is pregnant with our 3rd kid. We just got a giant dog. I'm like, what am I going to do? Well, my degree is in international economics, hence why I got the job at the NBA. My degree is in international economics, good at managing money, you know, all that good stuff. And the NBA obviously was international company and global company. So I was like, well, I'll go back to my roots from college. I'm going to start playing the stock market. I was always kind of good at it, and I go back to it, but I want to make sure that I have like my ducks in a row. Like my conversion to Christianity has like really taken root in me, and I want to make sure that I'm doing things the right way. And so I've read in the past about like speculation and how that was kind of frowned upon and blah blah blah. So I go and I think that, all right, well, I'll start this organization, my little nonprofit called Christ Center Capital. And what I'm going to do is every single week I'm going to take whatever I created like this little algorithm or pathway where I was getting all the highest recommended stocks and ETFs of the week from all the major outlets, right? I was taking all the stocks, ETFs that were really highly recommended, and I was running them through like an ethical framework. Like, does this agree with, Christian ethics and values, or does it not? So I was literally taking what the market was recommending to buy, putting it together in a newsletter and on a website, and telling people like, hey, this is being highly recommended to buy, but they do this, that, and the other thing that doesn't agree with the faith. And this one is being highly recommended to buy, but it is not counter to the faith. And I was putting it out there, and I was charging like $7 to get access to this. It was like really cheap, but it grew. It grew to the point where it was going to be substantial enough to where I could support my family. When it got to the point where it was substantial enough to support my family, I had this guy that I got connected with. His name is Jacob Imam. He runs an organization called New Polity out in Ohio. And really, really smart guy. And me and him started arguing with each other because he was a Catholic like me, and he was saying how all speculation is against the Christian faith. And I was disagreeing with him, and I'm like, no, some is okay as long as it's not, participating in this, participating in that. Well, long story short, I lost that argument. And even though I left the NBA, so I cut off NBA, can't make money from that for my family. Then I create this business and put my kind of savings into it and build it up, and I have enough substantial means to support my family again. And now I'm like, I gotta nix this as well. So I convert Christ Center Capital from a for-profit business where I'm, giving these like stock quote unquote recommendations and everything, to a philosophy site on the Christian faith and how it should interact with money and global finance. And people were actually really excited about it, and like they loved reading the newsletter and the essays I was writing and kind of following me along on that journey. But like, I'm not charging money for this now anymore. This is just like essays that I'm putting out for fun. So I go back to my wife. Now we have 3 kids and everything, and 4th kid is actually on the way at this point. And I'm like, I have no idea how we're gonna, because she can't go and work. She's taking care of 4 little kids, and 3 of them are in diapers at the moment. I'm like, I don't know how we're gonna make money for our family. And I'm like, I really like doing the C3. And I was getting speaking engagements to go and talk because people were interested about my perspective on like what the stock market is and why it's probably counter to the Christian ethos and everything like that. But it wasn't like making money to, put food on the table. Well, I get a call from this parish, and they just knew of me for one reason or another. And they're like, hey, we need a bookkeeper. Do you know of anybody? And they didn't even offer me the job. They just said, do you know of anybody? And I didn't even want the job because I'm like, bookkeeper, I'm picturing like a little old lady in her spare time, like, doing it. And I was like, I don't really know of anybody, but how much help do you need? Like, let me know a little bit more about it. Well, it turns out this parish that I called, they're actually one of the biggest in the Allentown diocese. They have like, at the time, they had like 14 different properties that had just been assumed by them. And I was like, all right, I can help you guys out while you find someone. But they ended up, so I started working for them as like a part-time gig just to kind of make ends meet or whatever. And it turns out that the snowball effect was already in motion because, again, they didn't have to pay for my health insurance. They came in, they saw, like, I was able to help them out quite a bit, from going from red to black and all that good stuff. And then the local Catholic school was like, we need a bookkeeper too. Can you help us with it? And I'm like, well, you can't expect me to be there too much because I'm working here and I'm doing my apostolate, but yeah, I can do it remotely and everything. And then from there, it went from one parish to a parish and a school to 2 parishes in a school to 3 parishes in a school, and then In the Zone came up, and they, because I'm doing nonprofit work, it kind of fits right in, and all of a sudden I have like 5 to 6 entities that I'm managing now from this niche that I didn't even try to get into. So
Now, let's just go real quick into the stock market, right? So you were a good, you bought well, bought at the right time, you sold at the right time, or you just traded well and stuff like that. But I want to go into why is it against the Christian ethos?
Yeah, so I mean, I wrote a whole book on this. Anybody can find the book. It's called The Devil's Gambit: How the Stock Market Destroys Wealth and Virtue. It's on Amazon and all that stuff, or on the web on my website, and it's pretty easy to find. Instead of going through chapter by chapter and all the spiritual or scriptural or economic reasons as to why it's opposed, I always tell people this one sentence, and I say, if you're a Christian, like, listen to this sentence that I'm about to speak and take it home in prayer, pray about it, and see if it hits home. Maybe it doesn't, but I haven't found someone who completely disagrees with it yet after having like an honest conversation. And the sentence is this: a Christian should never receive compensation unless they labor to produce a good or service that promotes the common good. A Christian should never receive compensation unless they labor to produce a good or service that promotes the common good. And then I leave it. I don't think anyone disagrees with that sentence. You have to see, does the stock market fit or not fit within that, in that framework? And again, I always encourage people, take it in prayer. And I'm not condemning anyone who invests in the stock market or anything like that. I'm just saying we should be very, very skeptical about what it does to society, how it influences our society, and how it influences us, and whether it is the ideal for producing saints, for producing people or helping people get to heaven, which is the ultimate goal.
So would you say it goes the same for playing the lottery?
So there's actually, like, say you were playing the lottery, going to, Wind Creek Casino down here or something like that. There's actually really, really well-written treatises and stuff on this type of stuff from, hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, 1,000 years ago, where gambling, not necessarily bad if it is perceived as what it ought to be perceived as, which is entertainment. You know what I mean? So like, I can spend $20 and go to the movie. I can spend $20 to Wind Creek and play adult video games. Whatever you want to do, right? I can pay $50 for a nice dinner, or I can pay $50 to spend, 30 minutes having fun with friends playing blackjack. Whatever it is. Now, if you're trying to make that your source of income, like a professional gambler, a professional table player and stuff, that's where the problem arises. And that's the same thing with the stock market. So, but the stock market is a little bit more nefarious than gambling. I make the argument that it is more nefarious because the way that it is set up is you are incentivizing money to demand more money, right? So right now in our economy, and again, we're sitting in the United States of America. We're the richest economy, in the world has ever seen. We have at any given time around $64 trillion sitting in so-called securities, stock market, bonds, ETFs, all that stuff. Now, 95% of those securities are owned by essentially the top 5% of holders. Mm-hmm. But $64 trillion, right? $64 trillion. Our global consumer spend amount is around 18 to 19 trillion. So let's round the numbers. $80 trillion total, right? Rounding the numbers, $80 trillion total. Only 20 of it is actually chasing goods and services. Now, you guys are smart guys. You probably had macroeconomics 101 or whatever it was in college or high school or something, or saw a video online. If you have an $80 trillion essentially economy, and only a very small portion of it, say less than 20% of it, 30% of it maybe, is actually chasing goods and services, what do you think the price of those goods and services is going to do? They're going to go skyrocket, which is what happens because you have, like, I just bought a house. I'm pretty against usury too, lending at interest, but it's the world we live in. And I understand that we're pigeonholed into this unless your name's Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. I bought my house, I'll be completely transparent, for like $350. All right. Bought my house for $350. If I do the typical 30-year mortgage at a really good interest rate because my credit score is good and everything like that, I will give the bank $680,000, somewhere around that. Here's the kicker. Do you think the bank had that $350 to begin with? Do you guys know? No, it didn't. It created it on credit. That $350 did not actually exist. It was created on credit. So because the bank has a big name, and because the bank has a reputation, it creates out of thin air $680,000. But I have to actually, tangibly create the $680,000 by working and producing and all that stuff. And where does that $680,000 go? It doesn't go to other people who want homes and all this kind of stuff. It goes into securities in binary ones and zeros, thus leading to the problem that I just explained of 60 trillion in binary ones and zeros, intangible stuff, abstract stuff. And now we only have a very small portion in the tangible, which is a crazy thing. It's very inflationary.
So it's creating inflation. So we're basically paying them. They're putting it into securities. It's creating inflation, which creates everything else to be more expensive.
Which is why Congress has tried to step in and somewhat failed, somewhat been successful of like stopping Bill Gates and BlackRock and these type of people from buying up farmland and everything.
Yeah, that's been killing us.
Because here's the thing. Like, think of Bill Gates. I don't want to attribute malice or anything like that, but think of Bill Gates as someone like the snake oil salesman. So he's got the Microsoft stock. Now, Microsoft stock, that's blue chip stuff. That's like top tier. The only thing better is Apple, right? Microsoft is a number one tier stock. Well, he goes around and says, hey, everybody, I got a solution to all your financial woes. Buy my Microsoft stock. And people buy it up like no other.
Mm-hmm.
Think of the late, 1900s and 2000s, people buying this stuff like no other. You know how much Bill Gates owns of it right now?
How much?
Probably 75%.
No, owns 1%. He sold it all, and guess what he bought? Tangible stuff.
So
he bought farmland and everything.
I want to go to this, right? We talk about the inflation, right? And then we get stocks that, like you said, they're abstract concepts like Tesla and Nvidia, where they're making, let's just say, $100 billion profit a year. Let's just say like Nvidia is making $100 billion profit a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's worth like almost $5 trillion.
Yeah.
Right. And the price is only going to keep going up. And that's taking the money out of the circulation. Am I correct? It's kind of like taking the money out of circulation.
Yeah, kind of like, it's not apples to apples, but it's taking the money out of circulation. Because a lot of people will give pushback. A lot of like people who are really well versed in economics, like they're going to give pushback when I say like the stock market is inflationary, because they're like, no, inflation comes from when the government prints more money. That's like the old school definition of inflation. But really, like, inflation is just a way of saying the currency is devalued.
But like, it's like this. It's like, okay, I'm Kia. I own 30 shares of Nvidia, right? Let's just pretend. But what does my 30 shares do? It's just money sitting in a security, and I can't really do anything with 30 shares. I have 30 votes. There's like 25 billion shares, right?
Yeah, and the corporate powers that be will never let like the retail holder as yourself actually have a say in like corporate board meetings.
And not only that,
facade.
But now I want to like extend, right? I want to extend, like, you don't get a say on what happens with the company. And not only that, like, let's go into the new fad, AI, right? Well, it's like, okay, a good or service is being produced, right? But where is the good or service leading us? Is it leading us towards good, all like good outcomes or bad outcomes?
Yeah, and you're getting into like the like I said, the book that I wrote, The Devil's Gambit, like it has this, it has kind of a three-layered thing. Like it's got its scriptural, spiritual reasons, it's got its economic reasons, practical reasons, stuff. You're getting into the spiritual reason, but I like to hit people with the economic reasons first because it seems to hit home for most people, even for someone who's nominally Christian. Like they're gonna feel the weight of the economic reasons more. Unfortunately, they should feel the weight of the spiritual reasons more. But the economic reason, first off, think about the stock market as if it were a business, right? So you have $64 trillion being invested into the business. That's the $64 trillion that sits in securities. But it's only producing enough to sell $20 trillion worth of goods and services. I mean, that's not hard to do the math. Like if the stock market was treated as if it were a business, it's well in the red. Like it's really, really.
I don't
in the
even
red.
think it gets to 20 trillion. I think the 20 trillion, most of it's like real stuff, like what everyday Americans are doing. You know, like I don't
No, that's the
like
thing.
you
That's
got
the thing.
10
It's not. It's not. That's
you
why
got
it's not
10
an apples to apples
companies,
comparison.
right? Right. 10 companies are like 50% of the weight of the whole ETF of the S&P,
Yeah,
right? And how much,
very top heavy.
you know, how much do they produce? Well, let's just say 1 trillion.
Well,
Not even.
I have a great example of this. This is where I can like really nerd out with this stuff because this is my background and everything. But Apple. So again, the blue chip of blue chips, right? From 2015 to 2020 or 2016 to 2020, something like that. You can go back and look. Their stock price quadrupled. There was no advancement
Share buyback.
whatsoever in the product they were selling. Their stock market value quadrupled. It was already a blue chip, but it quadrupled. And they produced nothing of value. It's money demanding more money, which is, it has so many economic and spiritual ills to it. They're innumerable.
Didn't they invest most of their profit into share buybacks?
Yeah, they bought it back to drive up because it's all manipulation. It's essentially what you see in like cryptocurrencies now, or the celebrities. It's a pump and dump.
Do you think Bitcoin is like the same thing?
Unfortunately, yes. Like I actually, I have a new friend, Steve Patterson, who wrote a book, Hijacking Bitcoin. Really, really good. Recommend it to everybody. And he makes this case too, where it was like, I never pronounce his name right. What's the guy who invented Bitcoin? Or
Satoshi?
Satoshi, right?
Yeah.
Satoshi. His vision for it was very admirable, of like a currency that cannot be manipulated and everything. But he was naive because it's always going to be manipulable because you have these. When was the last time you used Bitcoin to buy anything?
Never.
Never. But you treat it like it's Apple stock, don't you? Buy it up. Oh, it's going down. All right, I'm going to sell it here. I'll buy it back when it gets down low. And you're treating it as a speculative asset, like all the other stocks. And that's where the problem lies. Like if we actually were able to, some mind much better than mine comes up with a way where it can't be manipulative and it actually is a currency that's accepted worldwide and all that kind of stuff. Fantastic. Awesome. I'm all for it. But no one's using it to buy stuff. It's just another speculative asset. It's another speculative stock.
But what about using it as a hedge to inflation or like precious metals?
I think there's an argument there. I think there's a very valid argument there to where maybe because no currency is perfect. The US dollar is not perfect. Even a lot of boomers might get mad at me here when saying like even the gold standard is not perfect because even that's manipulatable when it becomes a global currency. Our real problem is that we're a globalized society. To come up with a currency that fits a globalized society is impossible. Now, if I'll throw out a nice old word like a societas, which is like a small knit community, which is what is probably the most ideal for producing saints. A small tight knit community that trades among themselves and does the things and everything. Real easy to find a currency that works for that. Really, really easy. Seashells or rocks or paper or whatever it is. Really, really hard to find a currency that works ethically for a globalized society. But to your point, maybe you think the US dollar is slightly worse than Bitcoin. Maybe he thinks Bitcoin is slightly worse than US dollar. Then you have a legitimate reason to buy the Bitcoin because you're like, I want this. Like, you want to promote it. I want this to be the currency, right? I want this to be the currency. So then maybe you have a legitimate reason as to buy it. But if you're just treating it as a speculative asset, I think you're committing that sin of speculation.
Yeah, it's more for the precious metals.
Yeah.
Because cash is just paper.
Yep.
I mean, gold and silver and stuff are actually worth something.
Yeah, they have a tangible value.
Now with the AI revolution, they're being used in semiconductors and such.
Yeah.
But I want to get to more of a spiritual talk at the end of our podcast. I want to go to, where do you think the next generation is going? Where do you think our society is going within the next 20, 30 years, especially with technology taking over, AI taking over? Like, how do you think we are going to remain spiritual as a people?
I've given this actually a fair amount of thought. I mean, it's a great question. I believe that Pope Benedict the 16th was correct. He said that the church, and he wasn't just talking about the Catholic Church, he was talking about Christianity in general when he said this. I mean, he was definitely emphasizing the Catholic Church, but again, it applies to Christianity in general. I believe the church will become very, very devout, but very, very small. And that kind of pains me because obviously I have 5 kids. I'm bringing them up, and I have another 11 nieces and nephews that are all very young and everything. And like, I want them to grow up in a spiritually rich world, but that's just not the case. And we know this from scripture and from Revelation and everything. Like, it's not the case. We should never. I tell this to everybody, and I tell this from In the Zone, because we are a ministry, right? We're run by a ministry, and we try to implement the gospel in everything that we do, from the AAU programs to Kia's American Christian League and everything, praying before and after games and practices. And a lot of people, especially young people, you kind of got like the spit and vinegar in you and everything, and you want to go and change the world. And what I like to remind Christians is, like, Christ never said he came to make the world a better place. He actually said the opposite. Like, it's going to get worse. It's going to be bad out there. But what he did come for is you and you. He came for your soul. Like, the world will not become a better place. Now, that doesn't mean we don't strive to make things better, but our ultimate goal is not to make the world a better place. We need to get out of that mindset of making the world a better place and get into that mindset of, like, what can we do? How can we better love our neighbor, which in turn will make the world a better place. But you can see the slight difference in the mindset there. And that's why I like to tell a lot of people. So to remain spiritual, I mean, the masses, they're not going to.
I feel like that's something I struggle with, because I think I'm that guy that you just mentioned, like the guy that believes they could change the world and bring all these. That's why
I don't want to discourage people like that.
Because I want it to start with our young men and young women, and then for it to, like, spread out to our communities, and then for the communities to change,
And now think about it. I'm someone who does a bunch of nonprofits, and I do these public speaking and all this stuff. And so in a sense, I'm trying to change the world. Like, I wrote a book about, like, why we should ditch something that has been culturally ingrained financially into the entire Western world, right? Talking about the stock market and speculation and usury and everything. But at the same time, like, I don't have this like short-term optimism that the world's going to change and, a bunch of people are going to read my book and everyone's going to get out of the stock market. But, like, I do believe, and I've seen it where, like, 1, 2, 3, 4 people, read it, they'll make a change in their life, they'll do something better, and it will enrich them. And that's what it's really about. It's like, again, yeah, we want the world to be as good as it possibly can be, but we need to focus on the people in front of us rather than the drastic change, because the drastic change will never come, but the change in an individual life is sure to come. And I say this to a lot of people. I mean, we live in the podcast world. We're on a podcast right now. Kia, your generation, 25?
Yeah.
You are the podcast generation. Like, you literally are. We're a little older, so we're not quite on that we're on, like, the cusp of that podcast generation. But I notice a lot of, my friends and family and stuff who are around your age and a little older, a little younger, they get very obsessed with like certain podcasters or certain things and going on. And a lot of it now, as you can probably imagine, I mean, we had the war in Gaza and the war in Ukraine, and then we have the Epstein files and all these different like political and global things going on. And it's always like a lot of people who have really, really good intentions, they want to change everything. And they're like, these people, their feet should be held to the fire and there should be justice and everything like that. And my response to them is focus on you. Focus on you. Because you know what the best possible, like for me, I could go on some crazy diatribe or some, crazy crusade to have the government release more Epstein files or to stop black money going from, the US to other countries or something like that. You know what that would probably do? It would probably be at the sacrifice of time with my wife and my children. And you know what my time would best be spent doing? It's probably spending time with my wife and my children, letting them know that their husband and their father loves them and that is there for them. And now I'm going to create 5, 6, 7 people that will understand what true love is, what life is actually about. And that just has the much bigger snowball effect than like the yelling from the mountaintops or going on the crusade. Like, and you don't have to have kids, you don't have to be married or whatever, but like you got people in your life. Your time is always going to be best spent worshiping God first and spending time with them second. Everything else is a very distant third.
And as a father and a husband who is a Catholic, or Christian, I would say, what are some pointers that you would give to, young men that are, about to have their first child, or they have their first child and they're about to be engaged or married? Like, what are some pointers you would give them to stay on the holy path?
Constantly remind yourself what love actually is. So, love is not a feeling. Love is to will the good of the other, as the words of St. Thomas Aquinas, and love is ultimately our Lord Jesus Christ, God incarnate. Love, understand what the definition of love is, because that's our purpose. Like, everyone wants to know the secret of life and everything. Like, it's not a secret. Like, we are made where our purpose is for love. Like, that's what it is. Like, that's why God is a Trinity. You have lover, beloved, and the love, that's God the Father being the lover, the Father being the beloved, and the Holy Spirit being that love connection between them. Like, we are meant for love, and constantly reminding yourself of that definition to where it's not a feeling, like, especially for young men and young fathers, like, there's going to be times where you have your kid and it's screaming, or you got a bratty 4-year-old or something, and you're not going to feel like you love them too much. But remember, those two words shouldn't be mixed, a feeling and love them too much, because love is not a feeling. Love is a choice to will the good of the other. And same thing goes for, for those young men when they're viewing their wife, when they're in interactions with their kids, interaction with their parents. Love is a choice. It's not a feeling. And that's one of the best things that you can have at the forefront of your mind, especially as a young man, because, the world goes in the way that the young men go. That's just a reality. It's just a reality. Like, I think motherhood and women are beautiful, and motherhood is the most important job in the world. But as I forget what philosopher said it, but
you can just go to the Bible.
Women create the world and men mold it. Women create the world from creation and birth, and men mold it. So men have to really remember what love is, because if men remember, women will instinctively remember what love is.
We're gonna wrap up. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast, Marc Lozano. We want to have you again, bro.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It was a pleasure.